There you go.
Okay. Yay. Okay, so let's jump
Hi.
right in. So, welcome everybody. Welcome back to the Five Guide. So, this episode is super special because it's my very first guest, and it is
Yay.
Kim Salter. So, I'm very excited, very excited. She is an amazing human being and also a intuitive guide, intuitive coach, EFT practitioner, a medium, all the wonderful things. So, thank you
Yeah.
so, so much.
I'm excited to be here. It's been so long since we've connected, I feel like. So I'm happy to just sit with you for a little bit.
I know, and you are booked and busy, so I know I really
I know.
appreciate your time.
Of course. Yes. I love being on podcasts and I love
So, yeah, I
chatting with
wanted to
people.
jump right in and
Yeah,
go back to the very first time that we met because it's just such a little funny story. I don't know if you remember,
I
but
do. I
yeah,
do.
it was so funny. I was like, I just moved to France and I was kind of like a little lost, a little,
Yeah.
like, where do I go? What do I do? Like
Yeah.
career-wise, specifically at that point. And I remember like walking around and I had all this time on my hands and I was listening to all these different podcasts. And I started Anna Grace Newell got put into my world through TikTok.
Uh-huh.
And so I checked her podcast
One of my
out and
faves.
then yeah. And she didn't have like one-on-one offerings at the time. So I was like, oh, well, that's a bummer. But then in one of the episodes, she'd mentioned you. And I was like, who is Kim?
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
I looked you up and then I thought, well, I don't know what an intuitive guide is, but I feel like I do need a guide. So I'll try it out.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because I booked an appointment for the very next day, which
Which
never
is
happens.
wild. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
wild.
never happens. And so I remember getting on the call and you were like, "So, super happy to meet you, but like, where are you?"
Yeah. Yeah. The crazy thing about that is, which I think you'll remember, is that in my entire career of doing this publicly for 12 years now, there's only been 3 other times that this has happened for my schedule.
Mm,
And literally, somehow, you double booked on top of my schedule that was already booked.
yeah.
And anytime this happens, I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm meant to meet with this person, that's for sure." Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So having you were like, "Well, kind of booked out, but," and I was like, "Oh no, I'm gonna have to cancel." And then you were like, "But I mean, this is like a sign that we are definitely meant to, have a conversation and see what's going on." And I was like,
Yeah,
"Okay."
it was awesome. I do remember, I mean, that feels like so long ago, but actually I think it was only 21 or 22. Was it
Yeah.
2022?
I think the summer of 2022.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that isn't actually that long ago to think back then about where you were at, right? Where
Yeah.
you were at vibrationally and where you were at in your life. It's just, it feels like a lifetime ago, but
It
it
does.
wasn't. It
And it's
wasn't.
so funny you mentioned that because I went back and looked over some of the sessions we had last night.
Oh, yeah.
And wow, like even, oh gosh, just my voice and my body language. I just was like a completely different person.
Hmm.
And what I really picked up on was like the words I was using. And it was so funny. And I wanted to, expand on this a little bit more, that heart mind
Yeah.
connection,
Hmm.
because I was using the words like I think and now I find that I use the words I feel.
Uh-huh. Yeah. That
Isn't
is
that
like
so
classic
interesting?
getting out of our head and into our heart for sure.
Yes, because I know that was the biggest part of. I know like this topic, I definitely want to dive into intuition, but when I looked back at that video, I was like, wow, like that heart mind connection that you taught me
Yeah.
was so important because I was shut off on my heart space so much. I was like in
Yeah.
my brain so much.
Hmm.
And you were like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah. I mean, first we should start by saying we're human, so we are programmed to be able to be in our head and our heart, right? Like we're programmed for that. And there are some people that are in their heart more often that have to manually switch into their headspace to make
Yeah.
choices and decisions that are best for them and best for if they're running a business or what have you. And then there are people who autopilot to their headspace and have to manually shift into their heart space. And so I always talk to people about, where do you spend most of your time? And through the seasons and the evolution in our lives, that will change, right? There are seasons where we spend a lot of time in our heart and our feeling and our intuition. And there are seasons where we might have external things happening that is creating a lot of stress and chaos, and we spend a lot of time in our head. So there's not a right or wrong way, but we're always trying to evolve to balance it, right?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
like one of the main questions that I wanted to ask. I'm like, because I do feel like I'm getting more of a balance. When you first learn one way or the other, like what you
Yeah.
just described, like for me, it was like opening up my heart and like diving into like how things feel, like not how I want them to feel, but like
Yeah.
what is showing up right in the moment for you.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I'm now in a season of really trying to balance it out because I was so into it so much for like a year that now I feel like I'm trying to like even out, and I feel like life happens. It kinda happens
Of
organically because
course.
I feel like situations happened where I was like,
Yeah.
"Ooh,
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah.
But I
I
wanted
mean,
to get, like, your insight on, like, how is it an organic thing or, like, are there things we can do to, like, really help us balance it?
yeah, I feel like this is the case with all of these areas in which we can grow is that there has to be intentional action, right? So it's not just letting life happen to us. It's where observing, right? Everybody hears this all over, but having awareness, observing. Like when we talk about balancing out heart and head space, it's not about perfecting it. What we're really talking about is noticing if there's a couple of days where you've been in your head a lot,
Mhm.
being able to notice, like, ooh, I've been in my head a lot. Let me get grounded. Let me get centered. Let me catch my breath. Let me go into my feeling state. Let me go into the quantum space. Or if we are just flying in this quantum state space, in this intuitive space, in this space that sometimes actually doesn't fit in well with our human experience, then we have to be aware of that and be like, okay, I'm procrastinating. There are some things that I actually really have to get done. Let me manually shift into that logical space, into that logic brain, and get the things done that I need to, not because we're trying to strive for perfection, but because we're human and there are things that we need to be in our headspace for. So, truly, awareness is number one.
Mhm.
Where are you spending the most time? And number two is if you're in your headspace a lot and you're noticing it, what we need to do is pull the energy down into heart space. And so that requires grounding, centering. I even feel this. I'm going through this right now. I've had some health stuff, and
Mhm.
health stuff makes me, I'm just going to speak on my experience, go right to my head. How can I
Yeah.
figure this out? What is it? And so I've had to implement for myself again, like a structured, like guided meditations every morning instead of just the free flowing meditations that I typically do because I need just a little bit of structure. That's my headspace needing some
Right.
attention, the structure, to be able to get into my heart space, which is the meditation spot. So for me, when I need to balance it out, I go to guided meditations instead of just my normal practice. So that's one way we can do it.
It's so interesting because I've been the same way recently, and I do feel like it's all the astrology of I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not an astrologer, but, like, I pay attention and I'm like, "Okay, when
Yeah.
I can't explain things, there are things in the cosmos that I'm gonna blame it
Yeah.
on, okay?"
Yep. I'm like, of
But
course there's a
recently
solar flare. Yeah.
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 Recently, I've had a lot of anxiety myself, and I'm not like, it's been so long since I felt like true anxiety.
Yeah.
And I shared in my last episode about it because it was like to the point where I was like waking up a little tearful and like,
Mhm.
oh no, like what is this feeling? And I found myself for a few days like really in my head about things. And
Uh,
like what you were explaining, I just had to figure out how do I get back into my heart space? I didn't realize that that's what I was even doing, but I
yeah.
knew I was in my head. So I went to these tools that I knew. And it's so interesting for you that it was like, more meditation. Because for me, and I think this is also like my Aries, like Sagittarius, like kind of fiery energy. Like I jumped into exercise because I
Yeah.
couldn't,
That works beautiful too.
like I
Yeah.
couldn't get into that meditative space. And the more that I wanted to, the more
Yeah.
frustrated I felt.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so I was like, what is going
we
on?
know we know that movement and pleasure,
Mm,
if we are in anxiousness, if our nervous system is activating, we know that movement and pleasure help us align more fully to calm. And
yes.
so, I say pleasure, and people often think instantly sexual, and that's
Yes.
great if that's the case. But this is even like check into your senses. What do you like to look at? What do you like to listen to? What do you like to taste in your mouth? Like, what do you like to touch? Do you need to touch something soft or smooth? This is like activating the sensory system so we
Yeah.
can switch focus from nervous system just for a moment and then go in and nurture nervous system. And movement is a beautiful way to do that. And a lot of
Right.
people can't sit still or haven't gotten to that point of sitting still yet. And that's okay. Meditation's not for everyone, and movement is actually the way that it works best for them. It's
Yeah.
still dispelling the chaotic energy. It's still getting that chaotic energy out of your body, which is
Yeah.
important.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting. And then you mentioning like the nervous system just like binged in my head. There was a Dax Shepard's podcast episode that you shared
Yes.
with
Yes.
James
I love him.
Doty, right? Is that his name?
Mhm. Yep. It's so wild, which is
Yes.
my maiden name.
Oh,
My
really?
Yeah, my maiden name is Dodie, and so when I saw that come across, I was like, I don't actually listen to the experts that often on Armchair
Yeah.
Expert. I listen to the celebrities and all the fun
Yeah.
stuff, and so when I saw the last name, I was like, "This is interesting," and I started listening to it, and he started talking about this quantum manifesting in this new way, or not a new way, but a scientifically proven way to get a little bit deeper in practice, and I was like, "That's so wild." I'm like,
Yeah.
same last name and talking about this. I thought it was so interesting.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
immediately what I thought of. I was like, wow, this is like a lot of the stuff that Kim taught me.
Yeah. It was really, I was like, oh my gosh, how wild is that? Yeah. So I always have been somebody that focuses on, first of all, my whole life I was told how sensitive I was. So
Mm,
from a little girl,
yeah.
and I'm sure so many of your listeners can relate to this too, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners are intuitive,
Mhm.
probably also recovering people pleasers, right? This is where that intuitive line often shows up. And so I really learned in the last probably 8 years how to manually shift from that label of like too sensitive into how can I help my sensitivity work for me? And in order to do that, I have to nurture it. And
Mm,
so for me, I am predisposed. I don't know if that's the right language, but my set point my entire childhood was anxiousness and fear.
mhm.
That was my set point because I was open energetically. I could feel everybody's home. I could feel what was going on with them. I could feel their just hyper aware of how kids around me even were feeling. And so we don't know how to even regulate our own feelings until a little bit later. So I was feeling all this dysregulation in the classrooms around me, and it was a lot for me. And so when I started to, actually, it's funny you mentioned movement. I started gymnastics when I was really
Mm,
little, and then I moved to dance in second grade, and it changed my life
yeah.
because my body could just like get rid of all that extra energy. And so now when I feel that anxiousness come back, what I don't do anymore is like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling anxious. That adds to it. Instead, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
there it is. Okay. Yeah, that's an ingredient in my recipe. That ingredient's not going anywhere. Anxiousness is an ingredient in my recipe, but I have so many other ingredients too. So if anxiousness is the biggest one showing up, I'm going to nurture it now. I'm
Mhm.
going to look at it. I'm going to say, okay, I feel you. That might mean lots of check ins during a day. For me, I'm an EFT practitioner, so I do a lot of
Yeah.
self tapping. It sometimes means having to clear my schedule if it gets really bad.
Yeah.
And I am at the point where I'm like, that's okay. It's all okay. There's no space in which there's anything more important than my own mental and physical health. And that takes, experience to get to that point.
Oh, yeah, and like you said, like, to feel okay saying, "Alright, I need to take a day
Yeah.
off," and I was always that way, and people always kinda shamed me for that, like, especially in nursing and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and I would call out, or I would just I'd give, like, the proper amount of time and whatever, I
Of
wouldn't just not
course.
show
Of
up,
course.
but, like, some days I needed just, "I can't do it today. I can't do
Yeah.
it. I can
Yeah.
feel it. It's gonna be one of those nights or days that I'm working, and someone's
Yeah.
gonna say one thing,
Yeah. It's
and I'm gonna
interesting
lose it."
because even when that comes up, it's not like I don't care. I do.
Right.
But part of this work of getting out of our head and into our hearts or into our bodies is being able to prioritize. And I happen to know if there is some, and this doesn't happen very often, but if there are days where I just can't do it, right? Because I'm doing medium work, I'm doing intuitive work, I'm holding really, really strong containers
Yes.
for people. And I happen to love what I do. Like I am so lit up by it. I love
Yeah.
what I do, but that also comes with having to know myself really, really, really well. And one of the things that has changed over the last 2 years is that I go so far out in my calendar now. I take all the days off that my son has off at school, first of
Mhm.
all, first and foremost, all vacations, all days off. I take those off as well. And then every single month, I pick 1 or 2 days in that month without vacations and that type of thing, just mental health days, and I cross them off. And so I'm even a year out from now, I know that my past self has supported my future self and taken days off in the calendar that are non-negotiable.
Oh, I love
And
that.
that has worked. Yeah, it's worked really well
Yeah, I
for
love
me.
that.
Yeah.
The past self, we're helping out the future self. I love that. That's
Yes.
a good I'm
Yeah.
gonna steal that.
It's important. I feel like it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to back up a little bit, like kind of your origin story and like how
Yeah.
I remember you was it interior design, right?
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
just like made the jump. And so I would love to, know
Yeah.
more about that and
It was really wild. So I went to art school. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts with a major in interior design and a minor in fine arts. And coming out of college, I went right into I interned at a high-end interior design firm in Michigan, and then went from Michigan to New York, and I worked for an architect and a design firm in New York. And then this is the fast forward version. But
yeah.
then when I moved to Nashville, I opened my own interior design business here, and it was doing great at that. And at the time, my son was starting preschool,
Mhm.
and I was holding women's circle here in Nashville. I had sat in women's circle in New York, and it was life changing for me. That's where I learned about tapping. That's where I learned about
Mm.
really, really focusing in on my energy because I've always been intuitive. I've always had medium things happening. And that was really the first place that I was shown sort of how to command the energy. So it was really important to me. And so when I got to Nashville, I started a women's circle. And one day I was at preschool pickup, and a parent came up to me, a woman came up to me and said, "Hey, I hear that you do a women's circle here in Nashville." And I said, "I do. It's so amazing. I love it if you want the information." And she said, "I also heard that you do EFT tapping in that circle. Is that right?" And I said, "Yes, this is Ramona Reed of Nashville Center for Alternative Therapy now and the Frequency Center. But back
Okay.
then, she was a mom um, who her daughter went to the same preschool, and she said, "Well, I am opening up an alternative health center here in Nashville. Would you ever consider being an EFT practitioner? Are you certified?" And I said, "I'm certified." And no, I wouldn't. I am an interior designer. And so
Wow.
I said, "No." And she said to me, and I always will give her the most credit for even where my career is now, because she said
Yeah.
to me, "Okay, would you at least be open to the idea?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm open to the idea." And she went on and said, "If I have somebody that comes in that wants to do emotional freedom technique, would you be willing to be open to talking about maybe doing it contractually?" And so she
Okay.
opened it up for me. I was like, "Yeah, I'd be open to it." Well, fast forward 8 months later, my interior design business is done, and I'm fully into energy work and
Wow.
tapping. So it was crazy.
I mean, so did you like talking about intuition and stuff, did you feel like when you kind of took off the interior design of it, was it, I mean, were you like, I mean, obviously you're probably nervous, but was it just like an immediate
So
yes? Like you felt it,
so
you knew?
yeah, the intuitive part
Right.
has always been my life. So it wasn't like that was weekend when I was doing interior design. I was just using it with my friends and family. I just
Okay.
wasn't doing it out in the world as a service. I was just doing it for people I was comfortable with. And
Right.
like that's always been a part of my story. And then when I had more and more and more tapping clients, um, and then my business grew through Nashville Center for Alternative Therapy on a referral basis. And Ramona knew that I also did intuitive work for my friends and family. She's also the one that was like, how about bringing intuitive work to the world? And I
Right.
was like, I don't know. I don't know. And she's like, just
Scary.
try it. Again, just try it. So that became an offering. And then that grew very, very fast. And it was another year until I would have enough confidence to bring my medium work to the world. Once
Okay.
I did that, it was everything just exploded. COVID happened. And because Nashville Center for Alternative Therapy was mostly body workers,
Right.
massage ther massage therapists, acupuncturists, that type of thing. I
Yeah.
was the only one that was still doing,
Like remote.
guidance online remotely. My
Yeah.
business didn't change, it actually expanded. Like, that between 2020 and 2022, my business grew 5 times the size. And
Wow.
so in the summer of 2022 is when I, went off on my own and
Yeah.
got my own office, and then just became Design Thought Studio, not an affiliate with Nashville Center for Alternative Therapy, but I'm still very close to all of them, and we still, refer each other and work closely together. Yeah.
Wow. See, I didn't
Hmm.
know all that. I knew like the bits and pieces, but and I knew you'd always kind of had that intuitive,
Yeah.
medium gift, but I didn't know that it
Yeah.
kind of went in stages like that. And it's really
Yeah. It's
interesting.
really, yeah, it's crazy. I always tell people, like, don't shut yourself off from
Yeah.
opportunity. You have no idea. I would have never known that this was going to be my business when I was an interior designer. I would have never known that. And
Yeah.
then as my energy business started to grow really exponentially, I learned so much about my vibrational input and how what I put out into the world vibrationally really was just referral based, is how my business grew. And that was because I had intentional vibrational output for it. I worked
Okay.
hard also. Like,
Yeah.
I definitely, there were years where I was in the hustle, but when the referrals started to just pour in and I was able to go on my own, I really shifted my focus from building my business to really, really being mindful about my vibrational output into the
Hmm.
world. And when I saw the changes that that created in my business, I started to then bring that to the world as soul business coaching. And I've helped so many businesses
I
now.
have to
I mean,
match that. Yeah, match the
mhm,
the vibration of it. And also
yeah,
take, the action towards it as well and let someone
yeah,
else know, hey,
yes, yeah. We have to be
I'm
really
trying
just,
to.
yep. Knowing what our vibrational output is before, if you're a business owner or even podcasting, I'm working with a woman right now who's getting her podcast out into the world, of really getting so clear on what is the vibrational output that you bring to the world. What do people feel? First of all,
Yes.
personal. What do you feel? What do you want to feel in your business? You also have to do traditional business, right? Or else
Hmm.
it's not a business, but this is
Yeah.
the vibrational side.
That's where I
What do
struggle.
you,
I'm like, I need help with the business
yeah,
business.
the business, you have to do that or it's a hobby. We know that, right? It's like,
Yeah.
so you have to get to that place where either you can hire someone to do the traditional business or you get super curious and you learn how to do it. Um, but the vibrational piece has been the missing piece for all the business owners and companies that I've worked for. They haven't had that piece. And I've watched their businesses grow exponentially when they click into that vibrational
When they
piece.
switch. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I guess sometimes it's so hard to know, like, if you're not getting the yeses, like you said there was, like, an influx of referrals and things like that, like, if you're not getting it, it's hard to know whether or not that's you maybe not putting off the right energy about it, or if it's just a no, and, like, now it's time to
This is going to
how would
be
you
maybe controversial, but
Yeah,
if it's not aligned, you're gonna get the no. You're
right.
gonna get no's. If it's not aligned either for you or for the service that you're putting out, you're going to hear no. But
Yes.
that's okay. I always say, I've probably said it to you before too. It's like we have to get okay with literally being so in tune with the fact that we are going to fail miserably and we are going to be wildly successful.
Yeah.
It's not going to be one or the other. It's both. I have failed so many times.
Yeah.
There are so many things that I failed at, and there are so many things that I have achieved and that I have, expanded into. And we have to get better at being okay with failing and just moving forward from it. What I have seen, not only in my own personal experience, but the clients that I work with in the soul business space, is that you can look back and see what didn't work and really be like, oh, right, because I was too fearful that I wouldn't make money. Or, right, I was so scared that I would do it wrong that I didn't show up fully. All
Yeah.
those things, they're normal. It's okay. But if you can get yourself into that place before the yeses or nos come and say, what do I want to feel while I'm putting this service out? Come up with 2 or 3 vibrations. I want to feel expansive. I want to feel freedom. I want to feel knowledgeable. It's okay to be messy with it. It doesn't matter. And really allowing yourself to go into, what will my listeners feel, or the people who are using my service or product, what will they feel? What do I hope they feel
Yeah.
when they consume my product or my service? Get real clear on that. And then every single thing you put out into this world, put it through that filter. Does this check the box of, is this feeling expansive? Do I feel knowledgeable here? And does it create freedom in some way, or whatever the words are? And if
Mhm.
you can check those off, then put it out into the world.
Yeah.
That's how you have a vibrational imprint for your brand and your business.
Yeah, I love that because I felt like I hit a stage like I don't do one-on-one coaching as much anymore. I felt like I felt like I was getting a lot of no's and like from people outside and myself. I kind of felt like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know if this is really a yes or a no. And so I'm gonna take a break from
Yeah.
it. And then
Yeah.
it's so interesting because I've kind of gone back and forth too on this podcast. It's scary to put yourself out and keep
Of
doing it.
course.
But
Yeah.
I felt like every time I tried to maybe close the door on the podcast, it was like my soul was like, no,
Yeah.
no, don't do
Yeah.
it.
I
So
mean,
it's
that's how
kind of
you
like a
know.
clear difference between
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
working out, or it's like you self-sabotaging and holding yourself
Yeah.
back. And yeah.
Usually that little piece in between is fear, right?
Yes.
Once you can feel that feeling of like, oh, I have something to say, I have something to share, and you get a yes for the podcast, you can look at it and be like, okay, I have some fear here and this feels a little hard, but I feel like I have to do it. Which
Yes.
is different if it's one-on-one and you're like, I know I could do this and I could probably build this, but I'm not feeling it. So it's a no. Such a different energy,
Yes.
right? It's like, okay, there's I don't remember if you and I have talked about this, but you can use your body as a pendulum. Did you and I talk about this?
I don't think so. No. Tell
So
me.
you stand, yeah, you stand with your legs hip width apart, you stand up straight. This is like on the vein of emotion code, but it's also like muscle testing. And you take a deep breath in and you speak out loud something that you know physically has happened to your body. So if you've broken something, I use pregnancy and birth. Some people don't have anything, so they use like pierced ears. It's true that I have blue eyes. It can be the smallest thing.
Okay.
And take a deep breath in, speak it out loud, something that you know is true. It has to be something physical, and see if your body leans forward or backward.
Oh.
Forward, if it's true and your body leads forward, I say I stand with my legs hip width apart. I take a deep breath in, and for me, I say I have been pregnant, and my body leans forward. That means
Oh, I
my
love it.
compass is set up that yes is forward and no is backward. So you've just set up your own pendulum using your body. And then once
Yeah.
that's set up, you ask the questions like, am I meant to do one-on-ones? Backward, no. Forward, yes. If it's unclear, ask more question, yes or no questions. So if you get a yes and you're like, really? Be like, am I supposed to do it this year? No. Okay. Am I supposed to do it in
Right.
2 years? Yes. Just use your body. This is not to make choices from, it's to get more data.
Right.
You can use it to get more data. And it
Yeah.
works really well.
I love that because I have like
Yeah.
the regular pendulum and sometimes I
Yeah.
don't
But you
trust
can
it.
use
I'm
to.
like,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like that, like using your physical form because you know what that is the thing with the pendulum, it is kind of connecting to your higher self and that energy
Mhm.
you're emitting from your body. I know it's connected
Yeah.
to the pendulum. And so it's kind of the same thing. I
Yeah.
feel like whatever energy I put towards it like a question, that's what it tells me.
Yeah. Of
Like
course. Yeah.
so fun to
That's
use your own body.
Yeah, that's why I always say it's really to collect data, right? It's to get
Yes.
more information, and then you can take time and do the things that you need to do to make a decision from there, but it
Yes.
adds to it. Yeah.
I love that. So I have like two like intuition questions and then we'll let you go because I know you got things to do.
Okay.
But they're kind of from my listeners and then one was for me because I was just kind of interested. So we'll start there with I don't know, you do you know your human design and
Yeah,
are you
I'm a
into that? Okay.
projector.
Oh, me too.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm,
Um but I wanted as far as like intuition and you know that you have your authority.
mhm,
So mine is sounding board. And I
mhm.
just kind of wondered, like, because everyone always says, like, trust your gut.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that it's just like an added bonus to know your human design, or do you think we can really just all trust our gut kind of thing? Like, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, I mean, it's so a couple of things.
Okay.
That's when we say trust your gut, we're implying that we have a beautiful relationship with trust. If we don't have a great relationship with trust, we are not going to trust our intuition.
Yes.
And so that's just a caveat of like, where is your trust at? So while we're working on healing our trust, because a lot of people have issues from that from childhood, that's okay. Things like the Enneagram and human design and these beautiful support systems can help us with more clarity, right?
Hmm.
When I found out that, this was, gosh, a handful of years ago, when I found out that I needed to wait for the invitation, that changed my
Yeah.
life. That changed my world. I was like, okay,
Me
that makes sense.
too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Projectors have to,
Yeah.
you're in your healthiest when you can wait for an invitation and then
Yes.
project your vision out into the world. It's not like projecting your emotions on people, it's projecting the vision so more people can see it. So,
Yeah.
anytime you can get more information, it's going to help you trust yourself more. And
Okay.
when we can start to tune into these things like Enneagram and personality tests and human design, which I happen to like the best, human design,
Yeah.
it's going to allow us to have a checkpoint and be like, okay, what does this feel like in my body? Do I trust that what's coming through is actually my intuition?
Yeah.
It's it's an evolution. It really is an evolution. So, yes, I think that knowing some of these things help
Yeah.
mostly because a lot of people are still working on their relationship with trust. And if
Mhm.
we're working on relationship with trust out in the world, then there is an element of trust for self that we still have to heal also.
Right. Yeah, I love
Does that
that. So
make
it's kind of
sense?
like yeah, absolutely. It's like an added bonus,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
underlying energy of trust is just
Yeah.
it's the key. Right.
But also the
Okay.
other part of that is if we're just looking at sort of circling trusting your gut, which is really like listening to your intuition,
Mhm.
then you have to create space for it. I have a lot of clients, first time clients that come in and say like I just can't tune in. And my first question is how often do you create space to tune in?
Right.
Most people are like,
Yeah, that
well,
was
I don't
me.
really have a daily practice. And so I'm always like, start there
Yeah.
first. Don't just jump right to like, I don't know, other people can create a connection with their intuition. I just can't do it
Yeah.
if you're not creating space to actually practice it. It's a practice. You have to listen, you have to
It
feel. And
is.
so, daily practice helps.
It totally is. And I remember
Yeah.
that. And everyone's always told me like, "Oh, you're highly intuitive and
Mhm.
everyone's always kind of told me that." And so then I'm like, "But how?" And then, when I
Mhm.
met you and we kind of just rolled through
Yes.
and I learned all these different
Yeah.
tools of journaling and meditation and all the
Yeah.
things, like it just organically fused together and it was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Like I like this life so much better. This is
I
so
know.
nice."
But
Okay.
notice too, though, that you took intentional action.
Yeah.
Something told you, like, I need to talk to someone about this. I'm ready for guidance. That is your intuition popping up, and you listened to it.
Yeah.
And that's how we came to work together. And so it is organic in the way that once you open your eyes to it, things fall into place and then you start
Yes.
doing the work, but you have to do the work.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
You're gonna
you have to
laugh
show up to it.
because and I know we're recording, but
That's
I
okay.
my low battery just went off on my computer.
Of course.
So that's why my speaker, because it's all plugged into one.
Ah, yes.
Okay. And I literally checked the outlet and everything. You guys, we
Right.
had technical difficulties, like my biggest nightmare of doing the podcast in the beginning
It's
of this
okay.
episode, but Now I know, I'm like, "Whew, okay, I'll have it together for
Yep,
the next one." So, anyway.
yep.
Okay,
So
very
the
last
audio is
question.
launching.
Yes, very last question, and this is from a friend of mine. She wanted to know more about, like, foods and things connected to intuition and, like, diet. Like, is that a big piece for, like, the lifestyle? Because I mentioned, like, alcohol and things like that.
Yeah.
So, do you think that that weighs a lot on. Yeah.
So here's the thing is that I'm going to preface this by saying that is not my specialty
Yes.
at all in a way that I service people.
Yeah.
It is, however, what is at the forefront of my life right now in my
Oh,
own
cool.
personal space. And I've worked with an amazing functional
Oh,
nutritionist.
cool.
Um, yeah. And so she really helped me heal my gut. I've been doing it for 2 years, gluten free, all this stuff. Here's what I know and what I've learned. And I see this all the time in intuitive readings for my clients, and no one loves to hear it. But we know that food radiates at a frequency. It just
Mm,
does. Everything has a frequency. Everything. Now, it's not the same response from every single body. It isn't.
mhm,
So we know that alcohol lowers our frequency. There's scientific research on it. We know that it lowers our frequency. Caffeine also changes our frequency. For some people, red meat lowers their frequency.
mm,
It's really a journey in figuring out, are you feeling amazing or are you feeling bad? Right? It's
mm,
really looking at like, try it. I always tell people I don't drink alcohol at all anymore. And the last time I did, which was just a couple of weekends ago, with a girls' weekend that I had,
yeah.
spun me into this crazy like health thing. And I had a glass and a half over
Wow.
4 days.
Yeah.
So, but I've been away from alcohol for so long, but that isn't the goal. The goal is that our bodies get adapted.
Mhm.
The goal is not cut it out forever and never be able to have any of this stuff and be so restricted. The goal is to have an adapted body. So when you take in something, it flushes it out, right?
Mm,
And so the only way we start to know, well, I'm not going to say the only way. One of the ways that we begin to know what works for us and what doesn't is by eliminating. And I
okay.
can't speak scientifically about this because I'm not um, educated in this professionally.
Right.
But if what I can tell you is your intuition, if you tune into it, there's people right now that have been saying probably for a month or two, like, oh, I should give up alcohol.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, why don't you just try it for a weekend? Just try it, see what it feels like. Try
Interesting.
it for a week, try it for a month. Like, it doesn't have to be so crazy of like, oh, I can't get rid of this forever.
Yeah.
Right now, I am on no sugar, no alcohol, and no caffeine. I know
Right.
for sure I won't be bringing alcohol back in, but I will be bringing caffeine back in and I will be bringing sugar back in.
Right.
But for right now, my body needs to heal. And
Mhm.
so we just have to be tuned in. Right? Really what your body is asking you is to tune in.
Yeah.
What feels good and what doesn't. So, does it change your connection to your intuition? For some people.
Mhm.
For some people, it does. Most of my clients, and this was my experience as well, that have cut out alcohol or caffeine or sugar or any other substance, it's been because they just kept getting this feeling that they should.
Yeah.
They
Yep.
just kept feeling like, "Ooh, I should stop smoking weed," or "I should stop
Yeah.
drinking alcohol," or "I need a break from caffeine." It just kept coming up over and over and over again, and then they finally did, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
needed to do this." Mhm.
Okay, that makes so much sense. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of like obvious in a way. It's like, well, just how does it feel? But we just it's so funny in the world how we really ignore ourselves so much. And it's just like just
Yeah.
pay attention. Like, how does
Yeah.
this glass of wine make you feel? Did it give you heartburn? Like,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
just like ignore so much. And I mean, hands up, like I did for sure for a
Same.
long time.
Yeah.
And so that's just
I mean,
so it's so simple, but yet we
it
don't do
is.
it.
But it's just like going back to the language of trusting your intuition.
Yeah.
If you're healing trust, then you're not going to fully trust yourself. If you're scared to feel because you were raised in a family where it's not safe to do so,
Yes.
then you're not going to tune into your body necessarily because that's going to
Yeah.
require you to really tune in to how something makes you feel. And there is a subconscious patterning, this comes from the trauma experience, but a subconscious patterning that says if I let myself feel even this little thing, like I'm not supposed to have alcohol, either A, it's going to make me other because all my friends still drink it, or
Mhm.
B, then everything is going to open up. I'm going to have to feel everything. So
Yep.
I want to just make sure that everyone understands it isn't that simple. We
Mhm.
wish it was. If it was, we would all be doing it, right?
Right.
There are intricacies here. And so you just, it really is like give yourself grace. If you
Yeah.
keep hearing something over and over, like, I should stop drinking alcohol, just try it. You don't have to make a big proclamation and be like, I'm never drinking it again.
Yeah.
Just play around, be playful with it. Be like, okay, I usually have 4 drinks out on a Friday night. I'm only going to have one tonight.
Yeah.
Then go to nothing. Like, just play around with it. That's
Yeah.
my
That's
best
so
advice.
true. It doesn't have to be so daunting and, you
It's
know,
restrictive.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Kim. So I want you to share where, your website and all the goodies so that everybody
Yeah.
can find you.
Yeah. So usually I'm spending the most time on Instagram. That's
Mhm.
at Design Thoughts Studio. You can find that on all platforms. And then website is designthoughtsstudio.com.
Yay, thank you so much. And I will link
Thank
everything
you
in
for
the
having
show
me.
notes. You are amazing. You're the
Great.
best. You give
Oh,
off the
it's so
best
good to see you.
energy, like the mama bear energy. I just
Mm.
love every time I get to see you because you're just amazing.
Oh,
Truly, truly, truly from the bottom of my heart. So thank you so much.
yes. Thank you for
And
having me. It was so good to sit with you for a little bit.
yeah, absolutely. So we will definitely see each other again and we'll chat soon.
Okay. Sounds
All
good.
right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Bye.